Moment here. This is not our usual time to talk about Revelation, but I've been meaning to give you the notes for the Revelation exam. Guys, listen close to this part. I'm going to read them off for you quickly. You'll find it on Google Drive, just like you always do. This is not due next Wednesday. It is due a week from this coming Sunday. All right, so this is slightly awkward. It's due on the 11th of September, which is the final day of our missions conference, and we're not having Bible school that night. Okay, so I'm just telling you so that you can kind of map this out in your mind as you have an extra 4 days to get this done. So please be mindful of that. Try to have it in on time. So the questions for Revelation, the final exam for it. Number 1, what happens when the following vials are poured out? 1 through 7, just like we had on the trumpets and the seals. And brief descriptions are all you need. Number 2, the whore of chapter 17 is a metaphor for what future entity? The future entity. Be careful with that. Number 3, give 3 attributes about the great whore that are specifically mentioned in chapter 17. I think there are at least 7 or 8. Pick 3, all right? Number 4, this mystery Babylon is said to be a habitation, hold, and cage for what things? Now, I put things, you can just say one of them, okay? It's pretty much the same thing, but look at the beginning of chapter 18 for that. Number 5, God's people are instructed to do what concerning mystery Babylon? This will be 18, verse 4. Number 6, why is heaven rejoicing in the first 5 verses of chapter 19? Very specific reason, and it's one thing. Number 7, give a scriptural explanation. Now, this one's involved. Give a scriptural explanation for the timing and venues surrounding the marriage of the Lamb. Now, I'll tell you what I'm looking for. Marriage ceremony, when and where. Marriage feast, when and where. How do we know it's when and where? All right, you understand what I'm aiming for. I don't need a full, paragraph or anything, just a brief mention biblically how that works. Number 8, for who is the supper of the great God prepared? Maybe I should say for whom is the supper of the great God prepared. Number 9, for how long is the devil bound in the bottomless pit? There is a specific number given. Number 10, give a verse from chapter 20 that speaks against the doctrine of annihilation. And then verse 11 is much the same. Give a verse from chapter 20 that speaks against the eternality of the earth. And I think I just made up a new English word by saying the eternality, but that's okay. I told my computer to learn that word, so hopefully that's a word now. But you understand what I mean. The earth is not going to be around forever, this earth. What verse in chapter 20 would prove that? And then number 12, briefly explain what the second death is. You should be able to give me one sentence. Number 13, where does the Lamb's wife dwell in eternity? Number 14, while we wait for Jesus to come, what are the Spirit and the bride occupied with? So this is chapter 22, verse, 16, 17, 16, right in there. And then number 15, what is the final warning given in Scripture? Now, I will narrow this down. Jesus said, surely I come quickly. I don't count that as a warning. But there are some very clear warnings at the end of the chapter. What are those warnings about? And then the memory verse is chapter 20, verse 12. Okay, so any questions about the questions? No? All good? All right, so they're due. That test is due September 11th. Now let's come to Genesis chapter 30. Genesis chapter 30, and this past Sunday we were not able to finish the chapter, so by the grace of God we'll make up a little bit of ground tonight. Let's come to verse 25. Genesis 30, verse 25. So we're getting out now of the whole baby mania thing. That's what we've been reading about. The children have been born. There still is one more to be born. We'll pick him up in chapter 35, but now we move on to a different subject. Verse 25, it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph, that Jacob said unto Laban, send me away, that I may go unto mine own place and to my country. Now you're going to see in a little while, Jacob is trying to get away here. He's trying to move on, right? Send me away. This wasn't God's timing, though. You're going to see in a few chapters God's timing step in. This is Jacob trying to move things along. Verse 26, give me my wives and my children for whom I have served thee, and let me go. For thou knowest my service which I have done thee. And Laban said unto him, I pray thee, if I have found favor in thine eyes, tarry, that means wait, for I have learned by experience. You know, you can learn a lot by experience. Don't discount that. And you younger folks, just give it time. Give it time. There's a lot of things. Listen, you can't rush experience. You just can't. You can read about other people's experiences, but that's their experience. And until you've gone through it, it's not to say you can't know it or explain it to others, but it is different when you've gone through it. So Laban says, for I have learned by experience that the Lord hath blessed me for thy sake. So Laban is referring more to the prosperity. His flocks have multiplied very well under Jacob's care, and Laban's put two and two together. As long as Jacob's been around, God seems to keep blessing me. Verse 28, and he said, appoint me thy wages, and I will give it. So Jacob, don't leave. Just tell me how much you want. And, it's a job negotiation. It's a salary negotiation. Verse 29, and he said unto him, thou knowest how I have served thee, and how thy cattle was with me. In other words, things have gone well with me. Verse 30, for it was little which thou hadst before I came, and it is now increased unto a multitude. And the Lord hath blessed thee since my coming. Now notice, blessed thee. Jacob's been the one doing the work. Laban's been the one reaping the benefits. And now when shall I provide for mine own house also? So I'm helping you store up for the future, but when am I going to start storing up for my retirement plan? Verse 31, and he said, what shall I give thee? Jacob said, thou shalt not give me anything. Jacob, he's a wheeler and dealer, man. He knows how to put it across. If thou wilt do this thing for me, I will again feed and keep thy flock. I will pass through all thy flock today, removing from thence all the speckled and spotted cattle, and all the brown cattle among the sheep, and the spotted and speckled among the goats, and of such shall be my hire. So I want all the offcuts. I want all the weirdos and the oddballs and the ugly ones. I'll take those. And Laban's looking at that going, take them. Fine. I want that storybook, all the sheep perfectly white as they're going through the field. So take the ones that are kind of damaged, That's how he's looking at it. But Jacob has a plan. Verse 33, so shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come. Whew, Jacob, that's awful pious for a man who's known to be a deceiving, conniving liar. But he's saying, no, I promise, you're going to see that I'm an upstanding guy. The reason that I want to take the oddballs, and they're clear, they're marked, they're naturally marked, so that you can take one look and you'll know if there is a full-on white sheep or white goat amongst mine, you know that I stole it. You'll be able to see that mine are ring-straked, speckled, spotted, something's, a little off there, and you'll see it right away. So shall my righteousness answer for me in time to come, when it shall come for my hire before thy face. Everyone that is not speckled and spotted among the goats and brown among the sheep, that shall be counted stolen with me. So he says, you'll see it if there's a defect. Verse 34, and Laban said, behold, I would it might be according to thy word. And he removed that day the he-goats that were ring-straked and spotted, and all the she-goats that were speckled and spotted, and every one that had some white in it, and all the brown among the sheep, and gave them into the hand of his sons. So he said, boys, I've got us started in a business. So I got some capital here. Here we go. Now we got us some sheep and goats to work with. Verse 36, and he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob. And Jacob fed the rest of Laban's flocks. So he's branching out onto his into his own space. This distance really did help Jacob. Right now it says he set 3 days' journey betwixt himself and Jacob. So Laban decided to do this, but this worked perfectly for Jacob. He needs some distance to run this scam. Verse 37, and Jacob took him rods of green poplar and of the hazel and chestnut tree, and pilled. Now we would say peeled, P-E-E-L-E-D, peeled. But this is just the old English way of saying the same thing. And pilled white strakes in them, and made the white appear which was in the rod. So you understand, he's just peeling the bark back. So if you've ever done this with a tree, you can take a knife and just peel back. And it has like a whitish undertone to it. So you can just peel that streak off. Verse 38. So what he's doing, right, he's creating like you seen barber poles where they have the stripes? That's what he's doing to these branches. He's taking these rods and then stripping it down so that there's streaks in the rod. Now this is Jacob's plan. There's nothing that indicates this is God's plan. And there's nothing scientific about this either. I mean, scientists have tried to duplicate this. It doesn't work. It's not a biological scientific fact. This is Jacob just trying to get crafty. That's all that he's doing. Verse 38, and he set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks in the gutters, in the watering troughs, when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. So as they're going in to get some water, he figures, well, now you are stuck, right? This sheep, this goat is stuck, and I'm going to put this rod down, and that way, when I see the strong male come, the ram come, and I know, okay, he's looking for a female, I'll put this rod down so that he is thinking and looking, okay, I want one of those speckled and spotted and ring-straked. That's what I want to hook up with. See, that's Jacob's plan. He's trying, sheepmatch.com. He's trying to match them up so that when a strong one comes, hey, I'll put it down and I'll manipulate the situation in my direction. So verse 38, set the rods which he had pilled before the flocks in the gutters and the watering troughs when the flocks came to drink, that they should conceive when they came to drink. And the flocks conceived before the rods and brought forth cattle, ring-straked, speckled, and spotted. Jacob probably sat back and went, my master plan has worked. I mean, he thinks it's working, right? We're going to see in the next chapter, it wasn't his plan, but verse 40, and Jacob did, it wasn't his plan that was making it work. Verse 40, and Jacob did separate the lambs and set the faces of the flocks toward the ring-straked, and all the brown in the flock of Laban. And he put his own flocks by themselves and put them not unto Laban's cattle. So what he's doing is he's being very selective. Every time there's a strong one that comes, put the rod down, make sure the conception happens, and okay, it's going to come out ring-straked, speckled, or spotted. And then when it's weak and puny or something that you don't want, don't put the rods down. That, and then little by little, it's separated into all of Laban's cattle were weaker and all of Jacob's cattle were stronger. And the stronger they are, the more they reproduce, and on it went. So Jacob's flock grew and grew. Verse 41, it came to pass, whensoever the stronger cattle did conceive, that Jacob laid the rods before the eyes of the cattle in the gutters, that they might conceive among the rods. But when the cattle were feeble, he put them not in. So the feebler were Laban's, and the stronger Jacob's. And the man increased exceedingly, and had much cattle, and maidservants, and menservants, and camels, and asses. So it's almost as if not only does he strip that thing down to make that animal, to kind of visually signal the animal to look for that, but also as if that rod would somehow have, let's call it some magical effect, that when the rod was there, a conception would actually take place. That somehow that would help the animal fall pregnant in some way. So that's in Jacob's mind. In chapter 31, we're going to see more information about that. Can I just quickly say, though, just on a practical note, God was planning to bless Jacob anyway. We're going to see in the chapter to come. You don't need to manipulate your way into success. Be very careful that you don't manipulate your way through your workplace and cut corners and work under the table. Just do your work and let God work out the prosperity or lack thereof, right? But do it right. You're going to be able to sleep much better at night if you've done it right. And you're going to see Jacob's conscience just eats him alive in a couple of chapters. Chapter 31 breaks into three parts, verses 1 to 16. He's deciding to leave. Verses 17 to 35, Laban is restrained. Verses 36 to 55, Laban is confronted. So, verse 1, and he heard the words of Laban's sons, saying, Jacob hath taken away all that was our father's, and of that which was our father's hath he gotten all this glory. So we can see how good things are going for Jacob. But Laban's boys are now saying, Jacob's a bit of a crook. And they're starting to pick up on it. And they're starting to verbalize it. And no doubt this story got back to Jacob. We can safely assume that. Verse 2, and Jacob beheld the countenance of Laban, and behold, it was not toward him as before. So now Jacob's hearing the rumors by the water cooler. Jacob's a bit of a crook. And now every time he bumps into Laban, Laban's not looking at him the same way. Something is different. And haven't we all experienced this? Where things are going fine, and all of a sudden one day, somebody's just not nice to you anymore. And you're thinking, what happened? What's going on? Jacob's putting it all together. Laban's boys are going back and telling Paul, they're saying, Dad, listen, Jacob's, man, he's doing something. We don't know what he's doing, but he's abusing your flocks in some way and getting this desired end. So verse 3, and the Lord said unto Jacob, return unto the land of thy fathers and to thy kindred, and I will be with thee. Now, God had told him back in chapter 28 that he would eventually do this. Right? And if the Bible hadn't told me the Lord said this to Jacob, I would find this very conspicuous to go, Jacob, this timing is rather convenient. But so you might look at this and think, well, why is God watching over and protecting Jacob? Jacob is not a great guy. He's a conniver. But so is Laban. And God knows in this situation, I have to choose between the lesser of two evils. Jacob is not getting it honest. That's true. But at the same time, Laban is not a great guy either. And we know that. I mean, he substituted Leah in for Rachel. And all, so God realizes at this point, if I don't separate these two, one or the other is going to, it's going to blow up. It's going to be a big mess. So it's time to go. Return unto thy land. Verse 4, and Jacob sent and called Rachel and Leah to the field unto his flock, and said unto them, I see your father's countenance, that it is not toward me as before, but the God of my father hath been with me. So I know things don't look so good. And Jacob, this is actually a solid response. He's telling the truth. Laban isn't looking at me so well, but God told me what to do about it. Now there's a good lesson in that. So my boss isn't looking at me so nicely, doesn't favor me like he used to. Okay, then go to God and say, God, what do I do about this? Don't just say, well, my boss isn't looking at me the same, so this is what I'll do. Pray about it. Let God give you some instruction on that. Verse 6, and ye know that with all my power I have served your father. Okay, that's true. We'll take that. Verse 7, and your father hath deceived me and changed my wages 10 times. Wow. But God suffered him not to hurt me. So every time Laban would change it, God would just bless Jacob anyway. Jacob needed to join a union, right? I mean, at this point, somebody needed to protect him 10 times a wage change. That's pretty bad. So, and then he explains that in verse 8. If he said thus, the speckled shall be thy wages, then all the cattle bear speckled. And if he said thus, the ring-straked shall be thy hire, then bear all the cattle ring-straked. So you see what Laban was doing. He was, watching how the sheep and goats were being born and saying, no. Okay, Jacob, you're getting too many of one. Laban would change it, and then immediately the next batch, they would be exactly what he changed it to. I mean, Laban just couldn't win. So verse 9, thus God hath taken away the cattle of your father and given them to me. So Jacob is making his case to his wives, saying, don't you see how God has blessed me and not your dad? And you got to think this through. Is that true? Yes, that is actually what happened. God is in control of how these animals are born. Is that true? Okay, that's true. That's true. Yes, there's biology behind it. There's natural science behind it. Yes, but God is the author of all of that. So let's acknowledge that. But did Jacob think that he had something to do with how those animals turned out? Oh, yeah, he did. Yeah, he did. So this is a bit pious on Jacob's part to say this, but he's making the case to his wives, listen, side with me, not your dad. And do you know how many marriages have that same struggle? Where the husband says, side with me, not your dad. Side with me, not the in-laws, right? Not your parents. It's still a big struggle. Jacob's trying to present the case. Now, verse 10, it came to pass at the time that the cattle conceived that I lifted up mine eyes and saw in a dream, and behold, the rams which leaped upon the cattle were ring-straked, speckled, and gristled, which is another way of saying spotted. And the angel of God spake unto me in a dream, saying, Jacob. And I said, Here am I. And he said, Lift up now thine eyes, and see, all the rams which leap upon the cattle are ring-straked, speckled, and gristled. For I have seen all that Laban doeth unto thee. So now Jacob's saying, ladies, do you see how everything's turned out? Your dad tried to deceive me, tried to cheat me, but God just kept blessing me. And as all of this was happening, God showed me in a dream that this is God doing it, that this is God telling me I am protecting you and blessing you because of how bad Laban's been to you. So he's really pouring it on thick. And I don't know. I mean, how do we verify whether or not that dream actually happened? Jacob might be just, greasing the wheels here a little bit. But I'm going to say that this story is true. I mean, here it stands in Scripture, so I'm going to say that it's true. In verse 13, I am the God of Bethel, where thou anointest the pillar, and where thou vowest a vow unto me. Now arise, get thee out from this land, and return unto the land of thy kindred. So ladies, I'm telling you, let's leave. It's time for you to leave your dad. Leave father and mother, cleave to me, which is right. That's biblical. And this is one of those cases where putting some distance between the wife and the in-laws or, their parents, that really helps. But Jacob has now tried to say, listen, it just makes sense. You can see it with your own eyes. God has told me, and this is a fulfillment. This is the conclusion of that whole vow thing that I have with God. So ladies, I need you to be on my side. We need to go now. Verse 14, Rachel and Leah answered and said unto him, is there yet any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Now look at where their thinking goes. So where are we going to get more money? That's where their thinking's at. Is there anything, if we stay here, what are we going to get? Verse 15, are we not counted of him strangers? For he hath sold us, and hath quite devoured also our money. So dad, by cheating Jacob, has been cheating us. So now all they're thinking about is, where do we have a more comfortable life? Verse 16, it's clear. For all the riches which God hath taken from our father, that is ours and our children's. Now then, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. So here's their conclusion. The thinking of these two spiritual giants, Rachel and Leah, their thinking is, okay, where do we get more money? That would be with Jacob. It's obvious God has taken it from our dad, given it to Jacob. So tell you what, Jacob, do whatever God tells you to do. No, ladies, be honest. You're doing what the money told you to do. But it sounds good. And so many people do this. They're perfectly fine to do the will of God as long as it's not costing them anything. If the will of God is going to help prosper you and fulfill your dreams and make your life more comfortable, as long as he's telling you what you want to hear, then by all means, whatsoever God hath said unto thee, do. I mean, amen, and shout the house down and praise the Lord, we'll do that. But as soon as, God's asking for a sacrifice, God's asking for something not convenient, then the amens quiet down, and it's not, well, whatsoever, right? Remember that man that came to Jesus and said, whithersoever thou goest, I'll go, I'll follow you, whithersoever thou goest. And Jesus stepped in, and I mean, most pastors, right? If a guy comes, a girl comes, says, hey, wherever you lead, I'll follow. I want to be a faithful churchman. Thank God, we need some of those. Jesus stepped in and gave some, let's say, qualifiers to that. And he said, listen, the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. Foxes have holes, the birds of the air have nests. The Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head. He said, you willing to follow? Because it's not going to be easy. Don't think I'm going to lead you down a comfortable path. It's tough out here. And we depend on God through God's people to provide for us. And I don't even know where I'm going to sleep tonight. You still want to follow? See, that's honesty. That's you knowing the whole story. That's you sitting down and counting the cost before you go. Rachel and Leah counted the cost. What it cost Laban. They counted the money, they counted, but not what they would have to give, but what they were receiving. Verse 17, then Jacob rose up and set his sons and his wives upon camels, and he carried away all his cattle and all his goods which he had gotten, the cattle of his getting, which he had gotten in Padan Aram, for to go to Isaac his father in the land of Canaan. All right, so I've written Haran up here. Padan Aram is up in this direction. Now he's going to come back down into the land of Canaan. Verse 19, and Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel, so shearing the sheep, right, I don't know if you've ever done that, but that's a very intensive affair, and you're occupied. You're not paying attention to what's going on around you, so somebody could sneak away very easily. So that's why it's mentioned that Jacob was waiting for the right time to sneak away undetected. Verse 19, Laban went to shear his sheep, and Rachel had stolen the images that were her father's. All right, that's a little side note put in there. That'll become important as we get to the end of the chapter. But this tells us something about Rachel. She, as best we can tell, she was not a worshiper of the true God. of the Most High God. The most generous thing we could say is maybe she worshiped Jacob's God and these gods. Maybe she had that dualistic thing going, but there's really nothing about Rachel up till this point that would make us think she at all worshiped Jacob's God. Jacob's God was a mere convenience. If Jacob's God told him to do something that would benefit Rachel, then follow that God. But, before we go, let me take these gods that I'm used to, the gods of my father, let me take them with me. And this is a picture of somebody about to embark on a new life, taking their old life with them. Saying that, but the way I've always, and if maybe you want to think of this in a more practical way, the way that I've always served God, let me take that with me. The way my mom and dad taught me when I was, let me take that with me. As I go into my discipleship and do whatsoever God has said unto that. That's Rachel compromising. In verse 20, and Jacob stole away unawares to Laban the Syrian, in that he told him not that he fled. So no goodbyes. Horrible South African. The exact opposite of a South African, right? There's no 7 or 8 goodbyes there. Verse 21, so he fled with all that he had, and he rose up and passed over the river and set his face toward the Mount Gilead. All right, Gilead is on the eastern side of the River Jordan. Forgive me, I should probably put this line maybe about here-ish. Right, so Mount Gilead would be somewhere right about here. So he's coming down this direction. So Gilead is the name of this entire area. And then Mount Gilead is, of course, just one particular mountain in that place. All right, so verse 22. And it was told Laban on the 3rd day that Jacob was fled. So Jacob now has a pretty good head start, right? 3 days head start. And verse 23, he took his brethren with him and pursued after him 7 days' journey. And they overtook him in the Mount Gilead. So 3 days head start, but Jacob's still moving. And Laban now gets started. It takes him 7 days to eventually catch up. So he had to make up that distance. Verse 24, and God came to Laban the Syrian in a dream by night and said unto him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. So this is Laban being restrained. Laban is ready to really let Jacob have it. Now, whether he's going to get physical or whether it's threats, we don't know, but he was going to take action of some sort. So God tells him, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. Don't flatter him. That's the good. Don't threaten him. That's the bad. So you understand Laban is also a wheeling, dealing, conniving deceiver. Him and Jacob have a lot in common like that. So Laban could have showed up and sweet-talked him. And God says, don't you dare. Because Jacob might fall for that. Don't you dare. And don't you go in threatening him. Because I'll make sure that doesn't work out either. So you just go in and watch your mouth. So watch how Laban words this. He's very careful with this. Verse 25, then Laban overtook Jacob. Now Jacob had pitched his tent in the mount, and Laban with his brethren pitched in the mount of Gilead. And Laban said to Jacob, what hast thou done that thou hast stolen away unawares to me, and carried away my daughters as captives taken with the sword? Oh, Laban, come on, man. That's not what happened. But notice it's a question. He's not saying anything good or bad. He's just asking a question. Now, he's painting kind of a bad picture, but it's not a threat. He's not flattering him. So Laban's working within the rules, but he's also, getting his point across. But he does it with a question. Verse 27, wherefore didst thou flee away secretly and steal away from me? And didst not tell me that I might have sent thee away with mirth and with songs, with tabret and with harp? Question. See how careful he's being here? Now, do you think Laban would have thrown a big feast and sent him away proper? Probably not. But that's Laban. So the first part sounds a little threatening, captives with swords. The second part sounds a little flattering, throw you a big feast. You can see what Laban had in mind. God knew exactly what to tell Laban. Laban, don't even try it. I know what you're thinking. You're going to go this way, you're going to go that way. Listen, man, God knows what your plans are. If this doesn't work, then I got plan B, and then plan C. God knows all about your backups. And your backups have backups, and God says, none of the backups, they're not going to work. Just go in and say this and do it my way. And he's trying. Verse 28, and hast not suffered me to kiss my sons and my daughters? Question mark. And then one statement, thou hast now done foolishly in so doing. Now, that's neither good nor bad. That is his observation. That is his opinion, his perspective. So he's not threatening him. He's not flattering him. You can see he's just saying, listen, you didn't do me right. Done. He's not saying, I will do this to you because of that. So verse 29, it is in the power of my hand to do you hurt. So he had intentions. But the God of your father, I like how he says that. He didn't say your God. He just says the God of your father. Because Jacob, I don't know if you're a worshiper of that God. That's a kind of an underhanded slap at Jacob, isn't it? But the God of your father spake unto me yesternight, saying, take heed that thou speak not to Jacob either good or bad. So Jacob, I could hurt you if I wanted to, but your father's God told me not to, so I'm healthy respect for him. Verse 30, and now, though thou wouldest needs be gone, because thou sore longest after thy father's house, yet wherefore hast thou stolen my gods? So he says, okay, you miss your family, you want to go and see them, okay, fine, I get that, but come on, man, why'd you take my gods? Now, Jacob, this is news to him. Jacob's standing there going, what do you mean? He didn't take the gods. But Laban is trying to figure out, what's the connection here? Okay, you took my daughters, you took my cattle, but my gods? Why would you take them? So verse 31, you're going to see Jacob answer in two parts here. Jacob answered and said to Laban, because I was afraid. Now he's answering Laban's first question. Why did you run away secretly? And he's answering, because I was afraid. For I said, peradventure thou wouldest take by force thy daughters from me. Interesting, because Laban accused him of taking the daughters as captives with the sword. And now he's saying, no, I was afraid that you would use the sword. I was afraid that you would come out and force your daughters out of my hands. So he said, that's why I had to do it secretly, because Laban, I was afraid of your violent side. Verse 32, and now he answers the second question about why did you steal my gods? With whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Wow. Just put him to death. Why? You know why Jacob is so strong on this point? Because he knows he's innocent. He knows he's innocent about that. With the other stuff, he has to be a bit, step a little gentle, because, well, he's handled things a little dirty. And not completely honest. But on this point, he knows, listen, I am not in the wrong. So go ahead, kill whoever you need to. But this shows you where a man's conscience bothers him. You know, when the conscience is clean, you can take this strong stand. But when the conscience isn't so good, you got to go very lightly through that. So with whomsoever thou findest thy gods, let him not live. Before our brethren discern thou what is thine with me, and take it to thee. For Jacob knew not that Rachel had stolen them. So he says, listen, let your relatives come in, your sons, your brothers, let them all come in here and look through all of my stuff. Go ahead, search. And whatever you find of your stuff amongst that, take it. Go ahead, search. This is what a clear conscience does. It says, look, I have nothing to hide. Go ahead. Verse 33, and Laban went into Jacob's tent. You know, if you trust Jacob, you just say, oh, okay, Jacob, listen, I'll take your word for it. You're obviously opening up and you're trying to be honest. That's fine. Laban doesn't trust Jacob any farther than he can kick him with his left foot. He says, something's not right about this. I'm going to go check. He went into Jacob's tent and into Leah's tent and into the two maidservants' tents, that's Zilpah and Bilhah, but he found them not. Then went he out of Leah's tent and entered into Rachel's tent. Now, the story kind of builds here. You're thinking, oh, boy, here it comes. You know, I mean, the verse is written very smartly. You know, yeah, he's going to get him here, he's going to get him here. Verse 34, now Rachel had taken the images and put them in the camel's furniture. Oh, she knew. She knew. I mean, when they started in Jacob's tent and Leah's, Rachel's, you know, real quick behind the scenes grabbing those out and sticks them in the saddle of the camel and all of that, and sat upon them. Verse 34, and Laban searched all the tent, but found them not. And she said to her father, let it not displease my Lord. Oh, very pious. Let it not displease my Lord that I cannot rise up before thee, for the custom of women is upon me. Now we all know what she's referring to. And let's acknowledge biology for what it is. This is a thing. I mean, this does hinder women from doing certain things. And only recently in human history have women been freed from this so that they can participate in secular life in a greater way? This is why women, for the longest time, were uneducated and didn't participate in like business and stuff, because for 1 week out of the month, she was hindered by this. And when somebody came up with the proper hygiene products, now they can fully participate. So that's just how nature kind of worked that out. But she's using it as an excuse, which, ladies, sorry, but yeah, some do. Some ladies do use it as an excuse. Now, listen, it is a legitimate thing. We get it, but don't use it as an excuse if it's not actually the problem. But she's claiming, this is a good way, because no man is going to challenge this. What man is going to say, no, get up anyway? I mean, Laban's going to respect that. For the custom of women is upon me, and he searched but found not the images. So Rachel, did she get away with it? Did she sufficiently hide her sin? Yes. Yes, she did. She did. You can get away with it for a while. You can hide it for a while. But eventually it will come out. Because if you just skip ahead in the story, just look at chapter 35, verse 2. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, put away the strange gods that are among you, and be clean, and change your garments. You see that? Verse 4, they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand, and their earrings which were in their ears, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was in Shechem, or which was by Shechem. Now, the reason I jump ahead, we'll cover that again when we come to it. Jacob eventually found out that it was Rachel. Right? Eventually, he saw those gods. Now, Jacob, shame on him, once he saw them, he didn't stop them. He let it go for a while until eventually he put his foot down and said, we're going back to Bethel, and we got to get things right with the God of Bethel, El Bethel, the God of Bethel. So guys, put the strange gods away. So Rachel got away with it for a while. She learned how to sufficiently cover her tracks. But eventually those things come out. Guys, you can bury your sins all you want. Proverbs 28 says, if you cover your sins, you will not prosper. It'll work for a while. Just ask Moses. He tried to bury his sin. He killed a man. He killed an Egyptian. And he buried him. And the next, the next day, the next time you read it in the story, somebody says, hey, you going to do to me what you did to the Egyptian? They know. Achan, you can hide those treasures under the tent. It'll come out. It'll come out. And listen, technically speaking, Achan got away with it. There's no way anybody would have known it was him, but God knew it was him. You can hide it all you want, but eventually it comes out. So Genesis 31 and verse 36. And Jacob was wroth and chode with Laban. This is like chewing him out. And Jacob answered and said to Laban, what is my trespass? What is my sin that thou hast so hotly pursued after me? Now he's really blowing his top here, right? He says in verse 37, whereas thou hast searched all my stuff, what hast thou found of all thy household stuff? Set it here before my brethren and thy brethren, that they may judge betwixt us both. Go ahead, give me your evidence, and let your brothers say who's the better man. Jacob's really riding this moment. He's really riding this wave of righteousness for all it's worth, going, finally, I've been vindicated. I'm better than him, and I have proof. Here's the proof. He wants everybody to see it. And he's going on a full-on rant. He's going to rant and rave here for several verses. Verse 38, this 20 years have I been with thee. Right, now, again, just do the math. 20 years. This makes him, 97? So I'm fairly old at this point. This 20 years have I been with thee. Thy ewes and thy she-goats have not cast their young, and the rams of thy flock have I not eaten. That which was torn of beast I brought not unto thee. I bear the loss of it. Of my hand didst thou require it, whether stolen by day or stolen by night. So if there was, like something broke, like in your workplace, if something breaks, generally the company would cover the cost of that. Jacob says, I paid out of my own wallet to fix what was broke. That's the claim he's making. Verse 40, thus I was in the day the drought consumed me, and the frost by night, and my sleep departed from mine eyes. He said, man, I had tough working conditions. Verse 41, thus have I been 20 years in thy house. I served thee 14 years for thy 2 daughters, and 6 years for thy cattle. And thou hast changed my wages 10 times. Except the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had been with me, surely thou hadst sent me away now empty. God hath seen mine affliction and the labor of my hands, and rebuked thee yesternight. Now he pulls in Laban's story about how God warned him not to say good or bad. I mean, Jacob is really laying it on thick. And he's saying, you meant all of this to my hurt. You have been abusive. You've been a bad boss and so forth. Bad father-in-law for sure. But God has protected me. And Jacob, well, he's right, actually. He's right. But Jacob, come on, man. I mean, let's tell the whole story, right? He's just telling his side of it. But in any event, verse 43, and Laban answered and said unto Jacob, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children, and these cattle are my cattle, and all that thou seest is mine. Well, Laban, it's not as if he's saying, Jacob, none of this belongs to you at all. I think Laban's trying to say, I am involved in this situation. You're sneaking away secretly as if I have nothing to do with it. But where did you get these daughters? Where did these cattle come from? Everything that you have now started with me. So I am a part of this, whether you like it or not, Jacob. I think that's the point he's trying to get across. And all that thou seest is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, or unto their children, which they have borne? Saying, Jacob, you're painting me out as if I wanted to destroy you and afflict you. He says, these are my daughters and my cattle. I care about these things. Why would I come to destroy it all? Verse 44, now therefore come thou, let us make a covenant, I and thou. Let it be for a witness between me and thee. So come on, man, let's reconcile. Let's come to a peaceful conclusion here. Verse 45, and Jacob took a stone and set it up for a pillar, typical custom of that day. And Jacob said unto his brethren, gather stones, and they took stones and made an heap, and they did eat there upon the heap. Right? Eating together is a sign of fellowship. It still is to this day, right? I mean, commons bride, and that's a sign of fellowship. If you can sit down at the table with somebody, generally speaking, that means you're at least willing to be at peace with them, right? This is why Jesus says, I stand at the door, knock. He wants to come in and sup with you and you with him. That eating together signifies a great fellowship. That's what's unique, or let's not say unique, but significant about the Last Supper and the Lord's Supper. The fact that we all take that supper together, it shows that there is a unity and a bond with us. So verse 47, and Laban called it Jegar-sahadutha. That is a great word. Jegar-sahadutha. But Jacob called it Galid. Now these is actually the same word, but from 2 different languages. All right, Aramaic, Jegar-sahadutha, and then Hebrew is Galid. And Laban said, this heap is a witness between me and thee this day. Therefore was the name of it called Galid. So Moses, as he writes the story, saying this is why we use the word Galid. He goes back to the Hebrew because that's what they would have said. But Laban would use the Aramaic. That was the language from Syria. This is the Syriac language, is Aramaic. All right, so the term Jegar-sahadutha or Galid, it means witness. And that's what that stone was meant to do. It reminded them of what they were promising each other that day. But then this particular pillar had another purpose, another meaning that they attached to it. Laban goes on to say, and Mizpah, verse 49, for he said, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. So this, I don't know if you've seen that, if it's a thing here, but in America, you can go into like a Qum book. We don't have Qum in America, but we go into a Christian bookstore, and they sell little Christian trinkets, you know. So if you want to be somebody's best friend, have you seen it where they have a heart that is broken in 2 and you give half to one friend, the other half to, okay. So this verse is actually put onto a lot of those trinkets. And the idea, whether it's a heart or a circle or something like that, the Lord watch between me and thee when we are absent one from another. So God watch over us. You know, this shows we have a special bond. And the idea is Laban and Jacob are creating a special bond. It's very sentimental. I understand why they make a little trinket out of it, but it's completely out of context. It's not as if Laban is saying, now Jacob, you're my best friend. You're my BFF. And I want God to bless you and take care of you and watch over you. I mean, come on. These are 2 old stodgy men that are not getting along very well. And he says, listen, while we're absent one from another, I don't think you're going to take care of my family very well. So the Lord watch between me and thee. We need God's help so that we don't wring each other's necks. I think that's what he's getting at. Verse 50, you'll see it as the context goes on, I believe. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, you see what he's worried about. If thou shalt afflict my daughters, or if thou shalt take other wives beside my daughters, no man is with us. See, God is witness betwixt me and thee. So I'm not going to be there to keep you in line, Jacob. So I am calling down your God to watch over your behavior and your actions. Verse 51, and Laban said to Jacob, behold this heap, and behold this pillar, which I have cast betwixt me and thee. This heap be witness, and this pillar be witness. Now, you'll actually find this happening in other places in the Bible. Joshua does this. In Joshua chapter 24, remember the famous passage, choose you this day whom you will serve, right? That passage, you'll find that he wasn't there. Joshua, he also calls a stone as a witness. And it's almost as if the stone is recording the words. But he's just saying, listen, here's something that's not moving. This is something that will stand the test of time. So as long as these things are around, let it ever be a reminder of what we're saying here. He says, this heap be witness and this pillar be witness that I will not pass over this heap to thee, and that thou shalt not pass over this heap and this pillar unto me for harm. So we can come and visit each other. But if I come down this way, I will not come down and attack you in this area. This is like the boundary now. This is the safe zone. So that they're kind of demarcating that. Now, obviously this applied to Laban and Jacob in their immediate generations and the other sons and daughters that were then alive. It's interesting though, as time went on, you don't see the Syrians coming down this way too much until you get to the intertestamental period. You read about it in Daniel 11. You had the Syrians up here and you had the Egyptians down here. This was the Seleucid kingdom and the Ptolemies down here. And these two came and fought and fought and fought, and Israel got caught in the middle. And there was a lot of harm done. But in any event, that might be a bit of a stretch to the passage, but that heap has been bypassed. Now, if you are a Jew hearing this as you're walking towards the land of Canaan, and you see that heap, because you're about to march up this way, you're going to pass by that heap. And it's going to be a reminder that God is watching over us, and that the enemy is going to be restrained by certain boundaries, demarcations. Verse 53, the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. And Jacob sware by the fear of his father Isaac. Now, hold your place here. Get Joshua chapter 24. And there's really not much reason for us to believe that the God of Abraham was the same as the God of his father. Terah was his father. Joshua 24, verse 14. So Nahor, there's not much reason to believe that Nahor was a worshiper of the true God either. Abraham had a walk with him, but the others didn't. Joshua 24, verse 14. Now therefore fear the Lord. This is Joshua speaking to the nation. And serve him in sincerity and in truth, and put away the gods which your fathers served on the other side of the flood and in Egypt, and serve ye the Lord. So your fathers, that's Terah, that's Nahor. On the other side of the flood, that's after Noah's flood, not before it. So he's saying you had some gods, some false gods. And even we see with Laban, right? We see a bit of that. He had false gods. So he's saying, put those gods away, worship the true God. In verse 15, if it seem evil unto you to serve the Lord, choose you this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served that were on the other side of the flood, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. So you're familiar with that verse, but maybe not the other parts to that verse. Let's come back to chapter 31 in Genesis. The God of, verse 53, the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of their father, judge betwixt us. Now, Jacob, it says he sware by the fear of his father Isaac. So, I'm not sure if Laban was aware of what God he was calling upon. Jacob narrows it down and says, I'm swearing by Isaac's God. It sounds as if Laban was referring to some other God, to be honest with you. Verse 54, then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread and tarried all night in the mount. And in the morning Laban rose up and kissed his sons and his daughters and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned unto his place. So everything ends up well. The sacrifice is done. It's all official. And nobody's crossed over the heap in the middle of the night to slit anybody's throat, nothing like that. So off they go. Now chapter 32, Jacob is now branching off into his own. And things are going to get real dodgy real fast for him. Chapter 32 breaks into 4 parts. Verses 1 to 8, Jacob fears Esau. 9 to 12, Jacob prays. Verses 13 to 23, Jacob schemes. And then verses 24 to 32, Jacob wrestles and prevails. So verse 1, Jacob went on his way, and the angels of God met him. And when Jacob saw them, he said, this is God's host. And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Mahanaim means 2 hosts, 2 companies, right? 2 groups, if you will. And you're going to see in just a moment why he would say that. But this is God's host. Now, how would Jacob recognized these as angels? Well, chapter 28, remember that dream? He saw the angels going up and down on the ladder, so he would have known that's how they appear. So now he's on his way, and these angels are there to assist him. Well, remember when he was leaving home, God showed him the angels were coming up and down. And now as he's going back, God is again, he's back. I mean, he's in Mount Gilead, and God's showing him again, the angels are here to watch over you. So he knows God has sent some protection. But watch what happens. Verse 3, and Jacob sent messengers before him to Esau his brother unto the land of Seir, the country of Edom. And he commanded them, saying, thus shall ye speak unto my lord Esau, thy servant Jacob saith thus, I have sojourned with Laban, and stayed there until now. And I have oxen and asses, flocks and men servants and women servants. And I have sent to tell my lord that I may find grace in thy sight. What's Jacob doing? He's trying to tell Esau, hey brother, I'm back. And I've done really well for myself. He's trying to kind of butter him up a little bit. Esau, listen, I know I was real bad to you. I got a lot of stuff now. Maybe we can work something out. He's just trying to maybe, you know how you do when before you get in the water, you just stick a toe in to see how hot or cold it is? That's what Jacob's doing. Send some servants, say hi, see how it goes. Here's the response, verse 6, and the messengers returned to Jacob, saying, we came to thy brother Esau, and also he cometh to meet thee, and 400 men with him. Oh my goodness. In Jacob's mind immediately, he's going, oh my soul, Esau has amassed an army, and he is marching my way. He is going to wipe me off the map. Verse 7, that's exactly how he took it. Verse 7, then Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. We would say stressed out. Greatly afraid and distressed. And he divided the people that was with him, and the flocks, and herds, and the camels, into 2 bands. Why 2 bands? Because Mahanaim, the angels were in 2 groups. So he says, okay, I'm going to separate my group, my flock, into 2. And I'll have some of the angels watching over this side and some of the angels watching over that side. I would assume that's why he chose to do it that way. But now this is, evasive maneuvers. This is a defensive position. I've got to protect myself. I don't want to lose everything. If I have all my eggs in one basket, Esau could come and squash us all. So let me at least separate into 2 bands. Verse 8, and said, if Esau come to smite the one company and smite it, then the other company which is left shall escape. So evasive maneuvers. Verse 9. Now notice, well, let me point this out. Forgive me if I'm spoiling the story. I assume that you've read Genesis before. You know how the story ends. Esau was not coming out of anger. Esau was very happy to see his brother. We'll see this in the next chapter. Esau was coming to fall on his neck and hug him and kiss him and say, brother, good to see you again. Jacob completely misread the situation. He heard Esau's coming with 400 men and assumed he must be angry. He assumed that for 20 years Esau is still stewing in his juices, still angry, still a rage monster. And Esau wasn't. Esau wasn't a great guy, but Esau was no longer angry. He completely misread it. You know how many times we get greatly afraid and stressed out because we misunderstood the situation? We're not even dealing with reality. It's some stronghold. It's some imagination that the devil has put into your mind, and now you've just run with that as if it's a fact. You didn't even take time to verify if that's actually what's happening. You don't even know. You just assumed the worst. And then you go dividing everything, and okay, now if that doesn't work, then that'll work. If they kill all these, and these will be free. Shame. You know what Jacob did? First, he went about protecting himself. Then he went to pray. And as best we can tell, this is the first time Jacob ever prayed. Let me say it this way. I think he probably prayed before this. But this is the first time in Scripture that we read about Jacob addressing God directly. So verse 9. And Jacob said, O God of my father Abraham, and God of my father Isaac, the Lord which saidst unto me, return unto thy country and to thy kindred, and I will deal well with thee. I am not very respectful, right? I am not worthy of the least of all the mercies and of all the truth which thou hast showed unto thy servant. You know, I have quoted that I don't know how many hundreds of times when I start to pray. I borrow that because isn't that true? I'm not worthy of the least of all the mercies and all the truth which thou showed unto thy servant. That is so true. And Jacob, he's getting real with God now. He knows God. When he was pontificating to Laban, God's vindicating me, God's proving me right, God's protecting me from you, wicked Laban. But now when it's just Jacob and God, I'm not worthy. I don't deserve it. I'm not righteous. And then he explains further in verse 10, for with my staff I passed over this Jordan. So he's right here, right? He's about to pass over Jordan. For with my staff I passed over this Jordan, and now I am become two bands. So now I just came over with a rod in my hand, and now I'm coming back with this great wealth and all these kids and family and flocks, and he recognizes how good God's been to him. Verse 11, deliver me, I pray thee, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, lest he will come and smite me and the mother with the children. This is a classic example of us not knowing how to pray as we ought. Romans 8:26, right? That's our infirmity. We know not how to pray as we ought. We go, God, please save me. Oh, God, I'm about to die. God, please. And God's up in heaven going, you're fine. You're in no danger at all. What are you crying about? It's like a man standing in the middle of the desert going, I'm drowning. It's a desert. There's no water. What are you worried about? Seriously, that is what happens to us so many times. Because we know how this story ends, when you read it, you go, Jacob, calm down. Just, catch your breath. Breathe. Verse number 12, he says, and thou saidst, now Jacob is claiming the promises. As he prays, he's claiming a promise. And thou saidst, I will surely do thee good, and make thy seed as the sand of the sea, which cannot be numbered for multitude. So he's reminding God, you've got to protect me, because you said that my seed would be multiplied. If we all get destroyed, your promise is going to fail. So I must admit, Jacob is on to a few things here, right? He's not worthy. He knows God's been good to him. He's being honest about what he's afraid of. And then he claims the promise. So there's actually some decent stuff about prayer in there. Verse number 13, and he lodged there that same night, and took of that which came to his hand a present for Esau his brother, 200 she-goats, 20 he-goats, 200 ewes, 20 rams, 30 milk camels with their colts, 40 kine, and 10 bulls. A kine is a cow. 20 she-asses and 10 foals. That's the baby donkey. And he delivered them into the hand of his servants. And every drove by themselves, and said unto his servants, pass over before me, and put a space betwixt drove and drove. So these are waves of gifts being given to Esau, wave after wave. Verse 17, and he commanded the foremost, saying, when Esau my brother meeteth thee, and asketh thee, saying, whose art thou? And whither goest thou? And whose are these before thee? Then thou shalt say, they be thy servant Jacob's. It is a present sent unto my lord Esau. And behold, also he is behind us. And so commanded he the second and the third, and all that followed the drove, saying, on this manner shall ye speak unto Esau when ye find him. And say ye moreover, behold, thy servant Jacob is behind us. For he said, I will appease him with the present that goeth before me, and afterward I will see his face. Peradventure he will accept of me. So went the present over before him, and himself lodged that night in the company. Now, we're going to see in verse 22, he rises up, takes his wives. He's going to do more to protect himself. And there's nothing wrong with taking measures to protect yourself, okay? The Bible says the horse is prepared against the day of battle, but safety is of the Lord. So we're not, when we protect ourselves, we're not denying that God is ultimately watching over us. God gives us some common sense enough to protect ourselves. So please take those steps. Hold your place here and get Proverbs chapter 21. I'm just going to finish you up. We're not going to finish the chapter. I want to take my time as we talk about Jacob's wrestling match with the Lord. I've preached from that portion of Scripture several times. It's worth us taking our time. Proverbs 21, verse 14. What you've seen Jacob do by sending these gifts over ahead, there's nothing corrupt about that. Right now, in the Proverbs, you'll find several Proverbs that talk about taking a gift in the bosom and its corruption. It's money under the table. Proverbs 21, verse 14. And those kind of gifts, right? If you're taking a gift and it's a corrupt thing, obviously that's something that's abominable. But this kind of gift, right? Jacob is sending a gift because he's done Esau wrong. And he's trying to kind of make up for that. And that's actually a smart move. You'll see in chapter 21, 14, a gift in secret pacifieth anger, and a reward in the bosom, strong wrath. So if you've done somebody wrong, and they are angry at you, they have strong wrath, and you deserve it, then by offering them a gift and a reward of some sort, say, listen, I'm really sorry, and I recognize I was wrong. This is how wrong I was. This is how bad I feel. Please accept my apology. That is so much. Here comes Jacob, right? He's in the back. That's what he told the servants. Tell them that I'm coming. I will personally apologize, but I want you to see just how sorry I am. And you talk about laying it on thick. Jacob sent a lot over. I mean, the wealth of that is what we would probably consider, millions of rands worth of gifts coming across. But that's how bad Jacob felt. At least, let's say that's how scared he was. How scared he was. Let's at least say that. But I do think that he felt bad. I think the conviction was starting to set in. And we're going to see some of that as we get into the last part of the chapter. So, okay, we'll stop there. Any questions about any of this stuff? Yes, ma'am?
In verse 54,
Okay.
where he's offering, is it just a custom in the stories father doing so? I don't know if he actually knows how to offer it. Why he's offering to God?
Yeah, it's been a thing ever since the garden with Cain and Abel. We read about the sacrifice that they made. But this is something that all cultures back in this day would do. They would sacrifice animals. Yeah, so right. It's not, we wouldn't want to read into this like the Levitical offerings and stuff like that, but this was according to the culture. Yeah. But, yes, sir?
30 verse 27. Very interesting possible principle here, where it says that what was influencing Jacob was the fact, or Laban rather, was the fact that he saw the hand of God on Jacob. That's very interesting, and would you say that could be a principle of life? Because what we normally do is, when we look at a career or a job we often tend to look, what are the advantages, money-wise and position-wise, for my future? Shouldn't one rather look at this principle?
Well, I would like to agree with that, but the problem is Laban was actually, the blessing that he was looking for was a materialistic type of blessing.